I recently attended the North Texas Teen Book Festival, and it was amazing. And one of the highlights was meeting Veera Hiranandani and getting to talk to her and share with her how much I loved her book, The Night Diary. It's absolutely phenomenal. After one of the sessions I was on, Veera and my amazing friend, the book whisperer, Donalyn Miller, were chatting, and I was like, hey, can I please just record you guys talking about the Night Diary? Because I think other people would want to hear it. So I hit record. They talked for, I don't know, between 7 and 10 minutes. It was amazing. You are not going to want to miss this. Just like you're not going to want to miss the Night Diary. It's phenomenal. I'll put a link to purchase that down in the description below. Enjoy your time with Veera and Donalyn. Two pretty awesome people.
So you were telling me, I asked you, had you ever heard about partition before reading my book? And you said, yes, you had taught it in school. And I was kind of amazed to hear that, because when I grew up, I don't remember learning about it at all. A lot of people our age come and say, I didn't grow up knowing about this history. And certainly kids who are reading this book, unless they have a family connection, haven't heard about it. And such a huge piece of global history. So it just makes me think of how many other pieces of history we don't know or we're missing. But yeah, and you were...
Well, to say that I knew about it is very surface level.
Right,
and,
right.
you know, I taught world history in middle school, and we had 2 or 3 pages about the fall of the British Empire and the many colonized countries
Right.
becoming independent.
Right.
And the partition of India was mentioned in a paragraph.
Right.
So that was my level of knowledge.
Right.
The faces of people, their experiences, the horrific circumstances for many of them, I did not know until I read your book. And I was so grateful that your book exists now, because it's a story that needs to be told, and all of our children need to read it. And it's also just a beautiful book. I think I told you I can barely even talk about it without crying, because the writing is so lovely.
Thank
and
you.
of course, you know, I'm not your market audience, because I'm a middle-aged lady. But I think about the children who will fall in love with your characters and really go on that journey with them in the book. And this idea of losing their homes, losing everything, and just, you've talked a little bit online about the sense of urgency that you felt about writing it, but you were reluctant to write it. Am I right, or right about the story?
I felt like, you know, I had heard about it growing up, and my father went through partition, and so it was this, as I learned more about it, I realized, you know, what a huge piece of history this is, what a tragic piece of history it is, of just people ultimately fearing each other and not understanding each other and hurting each other, people who all shared a country, and ideas of just putting people in different groups under different labels, when they don't necessarily have to feel like they're against each other. And so I would think about these ideas, and as I became a writer, I thought they were really important, but it was intimidating. I hadn't written anything historical, and I had such an enormous honor and respect for people who went through this time, my father and the millions of people who went through it. I thought, could little old me handle this history and write about it? What lens am I going to put on it? Where am I going to access it? And it made sense to write for younger readers, from a younger person's point of view, because I certainly heard my dad's memories from a younger person's point of view, but also just it was a way where I could really ask those questions from a younger person's point of view, from a place of innocence and a place of real truth that wasn't about the politics, that wasn't about kind of all these layers that grown-ups put on it. It's just like, why is this happening? And also that idea of, how could this happen? You know, I don't think anybody going through a traumatic period of time thinks that they were ever going to go through that.
Or you're not seeing an end to it either, you know, like, well, how is this? You're just in it. I mean, there's some scenes in the book where they're in the desert and they don't have any water, and as a reader, you're thinking, like, I don't know if you do this when you read, you're like trying to figure out, like, what characters have to survive for the book to still go on, and then you realize that some of the characters are optional, possibly.
Right.
And so you built that tension in the story. with the father and the daughter and the son, trying to flee, and then what could potentially happen to some of them. Are all of them going to make it out? And I think that's why a paragraph in a textbook does not do history justice.
Right.
Because the paragraph that just matter-of-factly states that India was divided doesn't tell you the stories of the people who lived through it. Was your dad, did he share a lot about this story with you as you were growing up?
Not as much when I was younger, but as I got older, I started to ask more questions. And his journey wasn't quite as traumatic as Nisha's journey was, so I think it was easier for him to talk about it. But it was still just, when I was 9, we just had to pick up a bag and get on a train, and we lost everything. We lost our home, our community. But, as a child, you're just so subjected to the agency of the adults around you. So you're like, I guess that's what we have to do. All the adults are telling me. And so I wanted to try to capture that experience, but you still have questions. You still wonder why you have to do what you have to do, but you sort of feel like you're not allowed to ask, and all the adults probably know what they're doing. But at a certain point, as you get older, you realize maybe the adults don't know what they're doing, and why am I being subjected to this? So it was kind of that journey, too, as she just sort of accepts her fate, but at the same time starts to have more and more questions about it.
Well, her father has been such a powerful figure in her life, and to see her father vulnerable, I think is a big revelation to her in the book, a big journey that she's going on too, looking at the loss of her mother, and then her father being such a strong man, powerful in his community, lose everything that gave him status, that gave him power, that gave him freedom. It's harrowing.
Yes. And then, this is a specific story underneath, a label of somebody who's a refugee, somebody who identifies with a certain religion. She's Hindu because her father's Hindu, but she has a Muslim mother. And all the labels that we put on people, but then there's that specific human experience underneath those labels. And to think about all the things that are going on right now in our world, in this country, and the labels that we put on those things. And with each story you hear in the news, there's that very specific person that's just trying to live their lives and going through this difficult experience that they never thought they would go through, and that just humanity underneath it all.
Well, time and time again, when we've seen change in the world, it's because we've been able to put a human face on these stories, on the politics, on the one line in the textbook. That's when real changes happen. So you have helped put a face on refugees, on immigrants, on young girls in so many powerful ways in your book.
Thank you.
So as a reluctant historical writer, are you thinking you might have another historical book in you at some point?
I think so. It's actually made me look backwards more, and I always go from what I'm connected to. I kind of look in that place. So I've been looking at some other pieces of history that I'm connected to and seeing, where my next story could be. So
well, I know we will all love to read it and share it with young people when
Thank
you
you.
do.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Veera and Donalyn, thank you so much for sharing that conversation with us. Friends, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have an awesome-tastic day, and happy reading.